Hello, this is Bishop Manigault. Welcome to Bishop's Corner. Thank you for taking the time to stop by and share with me a quick word from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 10. This is what the word of the Lord says. To keep me from becoming conceited, because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given to me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So now we get to this portion of the text. Paul recounts his experience of having been caught up in a vision and given supernatural insight by the Lord. Paul tells us that he was caught up into what he calls the third heaven, and he received revelations that he was not permitted to speak about. So you see, my brothers and sisters, there are some things that God allows to happen that are for your own personal edification and for your own spiritual maturity. This is one of those moments for Paul. After this, he moves from the explanation of what happened to him to the experience of what it means in his life. He doesn't tell us what he saw, but he does tell us what the result of seeing these revelations did to him. Paul said that because of what he saw, he was given a thorn in his flesh. It's not clear what exactly this thorn was. Some think that he had very bad eyesight, and that was his thorn. Others speculate that he had a speech impediment, and that was his thorn. Whatever it was of such a nature that Paul prayed and asked God on 3 different occasions to remove this thorn from him. Now, this request Paul makes uses the Greek word which means to cause to stand away from. The word is episteme. You can see that in verse 8. Paul wanted the thorn to be taken away. Get it away from me. He wanted nothing more to do with it. Now you must realize he does not make this request simply for selfish reasons. Verses 9 through 10 makes it clear that whatever this painful disability was, Paul viewed it as a hindrance to his ministry and, to his way of thinking, the spread of the gospel. This is why he calls it a messenger of Satan. He viewed it at first as something sent by Satan to hinder the spread of the gospel. In this, we see that everything we think that is sent by the enemy to hinder us may not always be so. Sometimes the things that hinder us have a greater purpose than what we can see or sometimes even understand. So I want to tell you today, with that in view, that no matter what comes our way, or no matter what comes your way, God's grace is enough. After asking God to remove this on 3 different occasions, we go on to read that Paul received a reply regarding the taking away of this thorn in his flesh. But the answer was not what he expected, and certainly probably not what he was hoping for. Having asked God to remove this hindrance, God answered Paul by telling him, My grace is sufficient for you, verse 9, or my grace is enough. Please note very carefully, Paul's request was not granted. The thorn was not taken away. Instead, he was provided the grace to what? To bear it. The Greek noun charis, which means grace, occurs about 18 times in 2 Corinthians, but only once in chapters 10 to 13. It usually refers to God's unmerited favor, but here it likely denotes God's divine power. So because of God's favor, he gives us power to bear what must be borne for the sake of his will in our life. You can look at it like that. This grace, Paul is told, is sufficient for him. The verb sufficient is the Greek word akou, A-R-K-E-W. This means to suffice for, to satisfy, with the idea of it being enough. The promise was that whenever the message of Satan afflicts him, he will be given enough strength, sufficient strength to continue the work. Now, in certain circles in the church today, there's a belief that it's God's will that everyone should be happy, everyone should be healthy. People are taught that if healing does not occur because they have asked God, if prosperity has not occurred because they have asked God, it's because a person perhaps lacks faith. This thinking is clearly contradicted by Paul's experience. Without doubt, Paul had great faith, but despite his requests and despite his great faith, the removal of the thorn was not granted. You must understand that this answer is not the answer that a mind that is focused on self wants to hear. This answer is not the answer that a mind that is focused on what God can do for me wants to hear. That's why it's sometimes very hard for us to hear when God simply says to us, no. That is why sometimes we think that God has not answered us when in fact he has. You see, we were expecting him to do what we asked, when we asked, the way we asked. And I've come to let you know that God does not operate based on what we want. He operates based on what is in accordance with his will for our lives. And I must share with you, the truth is, being the all-knowing and all-wise God, we want him to operate based on his knowledge and will for us, and not based on what we think we want and need for ourselves. So Paul asked God for the thorn to be removed. Paul did receive an answer, but the answer was, in fact, no. I'm not going to remove the thorn. My grace is sufficient for you. No, I'm not going to do it your way. My grace is sufficient for you. As a matter of fact, Paul, I'm going to do it my way. But neither you mind that my grace is enough. Contrary to what you may hear others say, God does not grant every request. Neither is he required to do so. No matter what we ask, no matter how much we exercise our faith, no matter how much we declare and decree, proclaim and claim, God is sovereign. So if you ask and don't receive, you should trust and still believe, because his grace, what, is enough. Stay before God's face and ask him, if you must, for a little more grace. Why? Because his grace is enough. And finally, when the going gets tough, always remember that his grace is enough. Well, my time is up, but I do thank you for yours. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Until then, God bless and have a great day. Bye-bye.